Taoiseach, last night, as predicted, the Brexit withdrawal agreement negotiated between the British Government and the European Union was overwhelmingly rejected by the British Parliament. As was the case during the Brexit referendum debate, the vote last night again reflects an absolute disregard for the interests of Ireland and for the international obligations of the British state to honour and implement the Good Friday Agreement. Indeed, there is an unmissable hostility to Irish interests in some sections of the British political establishment. The level of Brexiteer delusion is perhaps best summed up by the commentary of the DUP leader yesterday, when she claimed that we never had a hard border in Ireland. That is manifestly not true, and it illustrates clearly that Brexiteers don't deal with reality. And I'm sure you don't need me to point out to you just how worrying that is. Because with every day that passes, we lurch closer to the possibility of a no-deal scenario and the return of that hard border. Yesterday, prior to the vote in Westminster, the Taoiseach briefed us on contingency plans in the event of this situation, and these contingency plans focus on east-west matters. They're very important matters to protect trade and commerce between our islands. The Taoiseach has said that the legislation required to deal with these matters won't be published until the 22nd of February. Sinn Féin will assist in crafting and passing all necessary legislation, but I do have to say to you that you're coming to all of this very late in the day. So I think you need to revise that schedule, and we need to see that legislation before that. Taoiseach, however, the Taoiseach had nothing to say on contingency planning to protect our all-island economy, to protect citizens' rights, and indeed to protect the Good Friday Agreement in the event of a crash Brexit. Last night, as has been said, the Taoiseach and Minister for Transport were at odds in respect of checks on goods crossing the border in the event of a no deal. The Minister for Transport said there would be checks, the Taoiseach said there wouldn't. Now, they can't both be right. So who was right? Taoiseach, was it Shane Ross or was it the Taoiseach? I think the reality is that in the absence of a backstop, there will be a hard border and there will be checks. And you've skated around this issue time and again. But isn't it now time to say out loud that in the absence of a deal, there will be a hard border? Isn't it time to reassert that this is an unacceptable, indeed an unconscionable situation for us, to state clearly that we will not, that you will not, under any circumstances, accept a hardening of that border and the chaos that would follow from it for citizens in their daily lives? So I ask you, Taoiseach, to state unequivocally that the backstop remains the bottom line, and that you will defend that position and that there will be no resiling from it. And can I also ask you to set out the Irish Government plan to protect our all-island trade and economy, our society and our peace agreement in the event of a no-deal, no backstop Brexit?
Taoiseach. Thanks very much. Deputy, I very much agree with your initial remarks. We had a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. I remember it well during the Troubles and, of course, prior to 1992 when the single market came into effect. I remember it very well, crossing it as a child and in my early teens. There were customs checks. I remember the 24-hour rule, and I remember seeing soldiers. And I never want to see any of those things ever again on our island. Between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and that's why I've been working so hard to secure an agreement over the past year and a half. In terms of legislation, we'd expect to have the heads of the Brexit Omnibus Bill within the next 2 weeks, ideally by the end of next week, and that will give essentially a very clear picture as to what is in the legislation. And of course, we're open to input at that point from opposition parties as to whether it covers everything that needs to be covered. And we'd anticipate having the final bill ready for publication on the 22nd of February 2019. But it is a big task, and that's why yesterday when we produced our legislative programme, only 6 pieces of legislation are on that priority list for publication this session, 3 of which are linked explicitly to Brexit. In terms of avoiding a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, words aren't enough. And I hear people saying all the time, I hear this analysis that there won't be a hard border just because nobody wants one. It doesn't work that way. The only way that we can avoid a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland into the long term is by having an agreement on customs, a common customs territory or customs union, and regulatory alignment, either between Northern Ireland and Ireland or between all of the United Kingdom and the European Union. And that is what we negotiated in the withdrawal agreement and the backstop: a common customs territory and regulatory alignment, so that there wouldn't have to be a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. So it's not good enough for those who rejected this agreement to just say there won't be a hard border because everyone says there isn't going to be one, or because no one who wants one. We have to have a political agreement that must involve a single customs territory, must involve regulatory alignment. There are lots of ways of doing that. There are Northern Ireland specific solutions, there are UK solutions, but that's what has to happen if we're to secure an agreement and if we're to ensure that a hard border doesn't emerge on our island. In relation to your question, yes, absolutely, I'll defend the backstop. But the backstop is there as a means to an end. Let's not forget what the backstop is. The backstop is a legally operable legal guarantee that the mechanisms will be put in place to ensure no hardening of the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. It's the outcome that we need to achieve, and I stand by that absolutely.
Taoiseach, and I'm well aware, as you are, as to the intent and content of the backstop, and I welcome your assertion that you will stand by it. I take it that that will remain the case irrespective of what overtures might be made or what pressure might come from the British government or from other quarters. And the backstop is necessary, as you correctly say, to avoid a hard border, and therefore it logically follows that in the absence of that backstop, the border hardens. And that results in many, many things, including checks, as goods cross that border. And what you have failed to do again, Taoiseach, is to set out the contingency in that eventuality, and it's not one that I wish, or I'm sure anybody in this House wishes to see pass. But what happens then? The contingency legislation for East-West matters has been dealt with, and we will see the legislation. The question, though, the big, big question that remains is what happens as regards the border on the island of Ireland and all of the consequences, not least for the Good Friday Agreement. What is the contingency plan for that? Because make no mistake, Taoiseach, as sure as night follows day, if there is a crash, if there is no backstop, a hardening of the border follows automatically. And what will you do? I agree with you that you should not, under any circumstances, be the government that reimposed a hard border on the island of Ireland, but that begs the question again. What do you do? What do you propose to do? And what is the contingency in that set of circumstances?
Deputy, the government of the United Kingdom and the United Kingdom has given the people of Ireland and Northern Ireland a commitment that Brexit, their policy, will not result in a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. We have come up with the solution. We have it in the withdrawal agreement plus the backstop. That is how we avoid a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. It is now for those who rejected that solution to honour their commitment to us that there will be no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland by coming up with an alternative solution that does exactly what it needs to do. And the ball is very much now in their court. I don't believe they'll be able to come up with an alternative solution. I don't believe they'll be able to come up with something that departs very differently from what has already been agreed, unless they fundamentally change their red lines in relation to the customs union and the single market. But we stand by the withdrawal agreement. We stand by the backstop. Westminster has rejected it. It's now up to Westminster to come together to develop a solution to what they believe is a Brexit that they can pass through the House of Commons. But whatever they come up with has to be acceptable to the European Union and has to be acceptable to Ireland.